The knife felt cold against Natalie Norton's ribs, even through the thin cotton of her nightgown. A familiar weight that had kept her alive through 3 years of hell in Chicago's worst tenements. The stagecoach rattled along the dusty Wyoming trail toward Laramie in the summer of 1878, and with each mile closer to her unknown husband-to-be, her fingers traced the blade's outline through the fabric of her dress. She was 22 years old, orphaned at 19, and had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury women like her could not afford. The advertisement had promised a respectable rancher seeking a wife, but Natalie had heard enough stories about mail-order brides to know that promises meant nothing until proven otherwise. The stagecoach driver called out that they were approaching Laramie just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Natalie's stomach were not twisted in knots. She pressed her hand against her small traveling bag, feeling the outline of her few possessions and the letters from Owen Rutherford that had convinced her to make this journey. His words had been kind, thoughtful even, describing his ranch outside town and his need for a partner rather than just a housekeeper. But words on paper could hide monsters just as easily as they could reveal good men. The town of Laramie sprawled before her as the stagecoach rolled down the main street, a collection of wooden buildings that looked both rough and hopeful at the same time. Cowboys and townspeople moved along the boardwalks, going about their business in the fading daylight. Natalie's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her chest when the stagecoach finally stopped in front of the general store. Through the dusty window, she could see a tall man standing near a hitching post, his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly wind-blown. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. Owen Rutherford had been checking his pocket watch every few minutes for the past hour, terrified that she would not come, that she had changed her mind somewhere along the journey. At 25 years old, he had built his ranch from nothing after his parents died of fever 5 years ago, pouring every ounce of strength and determination into making it successful. But success meant nothing when you ate dinner alone every night, when the silence of the house pressed down on you until you could barely breathe. He had written to the matrimonial agency in Chicago with shaking hands, hardly believing he was desperate enough to seek a wife this way. But here he was, waiting for a woman whose photograph had shown serious dark eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. The stagecoach door opened, and Natalie stepped down with the help of the driver, her traveling dress dusty from the journey but her spine straight. Owen moved forward, his hat still in his hands, and stopped a respectful distance away. Up close, he was broader in the shoulders than she had expected, with hazel eyes that looked uncertain and hopeful at the same time. His face was weathered from outdoor work but young, with the kind of honest features that were hard to fake. Miss Norton. His voice was deeper than she had imagined, with a slight roughness that suggested he did not speak much during his daily work. Mr. Rutherford, she kept her voice steady, her hands clasped in front of her. I received your letters. I am glad you came. He looked like he wanted to say more but did not know how to form the words. The ranch is about 5 miles outside town. I have a wagon ready, but if you would like to stay in town tonight at the boarding house, I can arrange that. I do not want you to feel rushed or uncomfortable. The offer surprised her. Most men would have insisted on heading straight to the ranch, establishing their authority immediately. Natalie studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden cruelty, but found only awkward sincerity. I would prefer to see my new home if that is acceptable. Relief flooded Owen's features. Of course. Let me get your bags. The ride to the ranch passed in near silence, both of them too nervous to manage more than occasional comments about the landscape or the weather. Natalie kept her hand near the hidden knife, but with each mile she found herself relaxing slightly. Owen did not crowd her on the wagon seat, did not make inappropriate comments or suggestions. He pointed out landmarks and neighboring ranches with the pride of someone who truly loved this land. The Rutherford Ranch appeared as they crested a small hill. A sturdy house with a wraparound porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings spread across a valley with a creek running through it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and the whole scene looked almost peaceful in the twilight. Owen helped her down from the wagon with careful hands that released her immediately once her feet touched the ground. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, the home of a man who had focused on function over comfort. The main room held a table, chairs, and a stone fireplace. A small kitchen area occupied one corner, and two doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. Owen set her bags down near the door and turned to face her, his hat now hanging on a peg by the entrance. "I know this is strange for both of us," he said, his voice gentle but direct. "I had the preacher agree to come out tomorrow if you are still willing to marry me after seeing the place, but I want you to know that I will not force anything. The second bedroom is yours for as long as you need it. I am looking for a partner, Miss Norton, not a servant or a possession." Natalie felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen slightly. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Rutherford. Please call me Owen. Mr. Rutherford was my father." He moved toward the kitchen area. "You must be hungry after the journey." "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage something edible. I can cook." The words came out automatically, years of survival making her want to prove her usefulness. "I know you can. Your letters mentioned it, but tonight you are a guest." He began pulling out ingredients, his movements efficient in the small space. "Tomorrow, if you stay, we can figure out how to divide the work. I built this ranch to be successful enough to eventually hire help, but I have not managed that yet. It will be hard work. I will not lie to you about that." They ate a simple meal of beans, bacon, and bread, the conversation slowly becoming less stilted as Owen talked about the ranch and his plans for the future. He wanted to expand the cattle operation, maybe add some horses for breeding. He spoke with passion about the land and the animals, and Natalie found herself watching his hands as he gestured, noting the calluses and scars that came from honest labor. When dinner ended, Owen showed her to the second bedroom, which held a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. "I put fresh sheets on this morning," he said from the doorway, not entering the room. "There is a bolt on the inside of the door, though I hope you will not feel you need it." After he left, closing the door behind him, Natalie sat on the bed and let out a long breath. She could hear him moving around in the main room, the sound of dishes being washed, the creak of floorboards as he eventually went to his own room. She changed into her nightgown, slid the knife under her pillow as she always did, and tried to sleep. But sleep came slowly, her mind racing with thoughts of the man in the other room and the decision she would have to make by morning. The sun woke her early, streaming through the window with aggressive cheerfulness. Natalie dressed quickly, braided her dark hair, and emerged from the bedroom to find Owen already gone. Through the window, she could see him working near the barn, his movements purposeful and strong. She started a fire in the stove and began making breakfast from the supplies she found in the kitchen, her hands moving through familiar motions that helped calm her nerves. Owen came in when he smelled the coffee, his face lighting up at the sight of the table set with eggs, biscuits, and bacon. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to." She poured him coffee, then sat down across from him. "I have been thinking about your offer. He set down his fork, his full attention on her. "And I will marry you today when the preacher comes. But I need you to understand that I am not the sweet, gentle woman you might be hoping for. I have had to fight for everything I have, and I do not trust easily." "I do not need sweet and gentle," Owen said, his eyes serious. "I need strong and honest. This life out here, it takes both of those things." The preacher arrived at noon, a weathered old man named Reverend Michaels who had clearly performed many hasty weddings and asked no uncomfortable questions. Owen had invited two of his neighbors to serve as witnesses, a middle-aged couple named Frank and Dorothy Miller, who ran the ranch to the east. Dorothy gave Natalie a warm smile and pressed a small bouquet of wildflowers into her hands before the ceremony began. Natalie spoke her vows in a clear voice, watching Owen's face as he promised to honor and cherish her. His hands were steady when he slid the simple gold band onto her finger, and something in his eyes made her throat tight with an emotion she could not name. When the preacher pronounced them married, Owen leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips that lasted only a moment, but somehow felt like a promise. The Millers stayed for a celebratory meal, and Dorothy pulled Natalie aside while the men talked cattle prices. "Owen is a good man," she said quietly. "He worked himself nearly to death after his parents passed, trying to prove he could make this ranch succeed. He is stubborn and proud, but he is kind. You could have done much worse." "I know," Natalie admitted, "but I have been fooled by kind faces before." Dorothy's expression turned knowing. "So have most women, dear, but give him a chance to prove himself. I think he will surprise you." After the Millers left and the preacher had been paid and sent on his way, Natalie and Owen stood in the sudden silence of the house, now legally bound to each other. Owen cleared his throat. "I should get back to work. There is mending that needs doing in the barn. But I wanted to say that I am glad you stayed." The days began to develop a rhythm. Owen rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, while Natalie managed the house and garden she discovered behind the barn. They worked in parallel at first, orbiting each other carefully, learning each other's habits and preferences. Owen was neat, organized, and surprisingly considerate about small things like removing his boots before entering the house and washing up before meals. Natalie found herself cooking more elaborate meals than strictly necessary, wanting to see the expression of pleasure that crossed his face when he tasted something particularly good. 2 weeks after the wedding, Owen came in for dinner looking troubled. Natalie had learned to read his moods in the set of his shoulders and the line of his mouth. "What happened?" "There have been cattle thefts in the area. The Millers lost a dozen head last week, and the Thompson Ranch to the south lost more than that. I am going to need to start doing night watches, making sure our herd is secure. I can help." The offer came automatically. Owen looked at her in surprise. "You do not know cattle? Then teach me. You said you wanted a partner." Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her stomach flutter. "All right, we will start tonight." That evening, Owen saddled 2 horses and helped Natalie mount, his hands steady on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The last rays of sunlight were fading as they rode out toward where the cattle were settling for the night. He taught her the signs to look for, the sounds that meant danger, the way to move around the herd without spooking them. They sat their horses on a small rise, watching the cattle below, and Owen began to talk in a way he had not before. He told her about his childhood on this ranch, about his mother's laugh and his father's determination. He spoke about the fever that had taken them both within a week of each other, about the crushing loneliness that had followed. "I wrote to the matrimonial agency because I was tired of being alone," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. But I also did not want to marry someone from town, someone who knew me before and might pity me. I wanted a fresh start with someone who would see me as I am now, not as the grieving boy I was 5 years ago. Natalie felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. I answered your advertisement because I had no other options, she said honestly. I was working in a factory in Chicago, living in a tenement with 6 other women, and I knew that life was slowly killing me. When I saw your letter talking about fresh air and open spaces and a chance at something better, I thought it was worth the risk. And now, Owen turned to look at her, the moonlight casting shadows across his face. Do you regret coming? No. The word came out more forcefully than she intended. I do not regret it. You have been kinder than I expected, more patient. I am still learning to trust it. I can wait, Owen said simply. I can wait as long as you need. They rode back to the house in comfortable silence, and when Natalie went to her separate bedroom, she found herself wishing, just for a moment, that Owen had asked her to stay with him instead. The cattle thieves struck 3 nights later. Owen and Natalie were both asleep when the sound of gunshots cracked through the darkness. Owen was out of bed instantly, grabbing his rifle and running for the door in his nightclothes. Natalie reached under her pillow for her knife, her heart pounding, and followed him outside. In the moonlight, they could see riders moving among their cattle, trying to cut out a section of the herd and drive them away. Owen raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, his voice carrying across the valley. "Those are my cattle. Get off my land." The riders wheeled their horses around, and for a terrible moment, Natalie thought they were going to charge at the house. Instead, they fired a few shots in Owen's direction and then spurred their horses away, abandoning their attempt. Owen stood on the porch, his rifle ready, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely into the night. When he finally lowered the weapon, Natalie could see that he was shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline and anger. "They will come back," he said grimly. "They always do." She stepped closer to him, still holding her knife. "Then we will be ready." Owen noticed the blade in her hand for the first time, his eyes widening slightly. "You sleep with a knife, always." She did not elaborate, waiting for his judgment or mockery. Instead, his expression softened. "What happened to you in Chicago, Natalie?" The question, asked with such gentle concern, nearly broke her. "Things I do not talk about. Things that taught me to always be ready to fight." Owen slowly reached out and covered her hand with his palm warm against her cold fingers. "You will not need that here. I swear to you on my parents' graves that I will never give you reason to use that knife against me. And I will never let anyone else hurt you either." Tears stung Natalie's eyes, a reaction she had not allowed herself in years. "You cannot promise that." "I can promise that I will die trying to keep you safe." His voice was fierce, absolute. "That is a promise I can make and keep." She looked up at him, this man who had been a stranger a month ago and was now her husband, and felt something inside her finally give way. She stepped into his arms, and he held her carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile. They stood like that on the porch until the sky began to lighten in the east, holding each other against the dangers of the night. The next day, Owen organized a meeting with the neighboring ranchers. They gathered at the Rutherford house, a dozen men and a few women, all grim-faced and determined. The cattle thieves had been plaguing the area for months, growing bolder with each successful raid. The sheriff in Laramie seemed unable or unwilling to stop them, and the ranchers were tired of losing their livelihoods. Frank Miller suggested organizing patrols, taking turns watching each other's herds. It would mean less sleep and more work for everyone, but it was better than letting the thieves operate unchallenged. The group agreed, setting up a schedule that would have at least 2 armed men watching the cattle in the area every night. Natalie served coffee and sandwiches during the meeting, listening to the discussions and noting how the other ranchers treated Owen with respect despite his relative youth. He had proven himself to be capable and hardworking, and his opinions carried weight. When Dorothy Miller thanked her for the food, she added in a low voice, "You are good for him. He looks less haunted than he did before you came." That night, it was Owen's turn to patrol with Frank Miller, leaving Natalie alone in the house for the first time since the wedding. She locked the doors, checked the windows, and then sat in the main room with a book, too restless to actually read. The knife was in her pocket, a familiar weight that usually comforted her but tonight just felt heavy. She must have dozed off in the chair because she woke to the sound of Owen coming through the door just before dawn. He looked exhausted, his face drawn with fatigue, and he started slightly when he saw her in the chair. "You did not have to wait up. I could not sleep." She stood, moving to the kitchen to start coffee. Was everything quiet? Yes, thank God. Maybe word has spread that we are fighting back. He sank into a chair at the table, watching her move around the kitchen. "Natalie, can I ask you something?" She turned to face him, suddenly nervous. "What is it? Why did you really come west? I know you said you had no options, but there are factories in other cities, other places you could have gone that did not involve marrying a stranger." Natalie poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Because I was tired of being afraid," she said finally. "In Chicago, I was afraid every moment of every day. Afraid of the men at the factory, afraid of the landlord, afraid of running out of money for food. Your letters promised something different, and I thought that even if you turned out to be terrible, at least it would be a different kind of terrible. At least I would have tried for something better." Owen reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking that chance." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Natalie felt her heart racing, felt the pull toward this man who had somehow, impossibly, made her feel safe. "Owen, I think I am ready to move into your room, if the offer still stands." His eyes widened, and then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from handsome to beautiful. "The offer will always stand. But I need to tell you something first. I have never been with a woman before. I do not want you to expect that I will know what I am doing." The admission, made with such vulnerable honesty, touched something deep in Natalie's chest. "I have not been with a man either, not willingly. But we can figure it out together." They moved to his bedroom as the sun rose, filling the room with soft golden light. Owen kissed her slowly, carefully, learning the shape of her mouth and the taste of her skin. When he unlaced her nightgown, his hands were shaking, and she covered them with her own to steady them. They made love awkwardly at first, both nervous and uncertain, but Owen was so gentle and attentive that Natalie felt tears sliding down her temples from the overwhelming tenderness of it. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, and Owen traced the line of her jaw with his finger. "I think I am falling in love with you." Natalie turned her face to kiss his palm. "I think I might already love you." The cattle thieves struck the Thompson Ranch 2 weeks later despite the patrols, killing one of the ranch hands in the process. The violence shook the entire community and spurred the ranchers to more aggressive action. They contacted the territorial marshal in Cheyenne, who promised to send deputies to investigate. In the meantime, the patrols continued, with everyone on edge and armed. Natalie and Owen had settled into married life with surprising ease. She had moved her few possessions into his room, though she still kept her knife under her pillow out of habit. Owen teased her about it gently but never tried to take it away, understanding that she needed time to fully believe in her safety. They worked side by side during the days and held each other through the nights, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. One afternoon, while Owen was working on repairing fence line, Natalie decided to ride out with lunch for him. She had become a more confident rider over the past weeks, and the mare Owen had chosen for her was gentle and steady. She found him stripped to his undershirt in the heat, sweat glistening on his shoulders as he hammered posts into the hard ground. He looked up at her approach and grinned, that open expression of joy that still made her stomach flip. "You are a sight for sore eyes. You are going to burn in this sun." She handed him a canteen of water and unwrapped the sandwiches she had brought. They sat in the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree, and Natalie found herself studying her husband's profile as he ate and talked about his plans for the ranch. "I was thinking," Owen said, "that maybe next year we could add a few more rooms to the house. Eventually, we might need space for children." He said it casually, but she could see the hope and uncertainty in his eyes. "I would like that," Natalie admitted. "Though I need to confess something, I am terrified of childbirth. My mother died having my younger brother, and I saw so many women in Chicago worn down by too many children too close together." Owen set down his sandwich and turned to face her fully. "Then we will be careful. I do not want children at the cost of your life or health. We have time to figure it out, and if we never have children, that will be all right too. I married you because I wanted you, not because I wanted a brood mare." The words, so fierce and protective, made Natalie love him even more. She leaned in and kissed him, tasting water and sunshine and something uniquely Owen. He pulled her close, his hands warm on her back, and they stayed like that for a long moment before he reluctantly pulled away. "I need to finish this fence line before dark. But tonight, I am taking you out to watch the sunset from the ridge. I want to show you something." That evening they rode together to a high point on the ranch property, and Owen helped her down from her horse. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of red and gold, painting the entire valley in warm light. Owen stood behind her, his arms around her waist, and pointed to the land spread out before them. "All of this, everything you can see, this is ours. When I was working myself to exhaustion after my parents died, I would come up here and imagine sharing it with someone. I imagined what it would be like to have a partner who understood why this land matters, why it is worth fighting for. And now here you are, more than I ever hoped for." Natalie leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could have this. A home, a husband who actually cares about me, a future that does not involve just surviving. You gave me that, Owen. We gave it to each other." He kissed the top of her head. "I was just surviving too before you came. Now I am living." The territorial marshal's deputies arrived in early September, two weathered men who looked like they had seen every kind of trouble the West could offer. They interviewed all the ranchers who had been targeted, examined the sites of the thefts, and then set up their own surveillance operation. It took only 3 nights before they caught the thieves in the act. The gunfight was brief but intense, echoing across the valley in the dead of night. Owen grabbed his rifle, but Natalie held his arm. "The deputies can handle it. Do not risk yourself." He looked torn, the instinct to protect his property warring with the knowledge that she was right. In the end, he stayed, and they waited together in tense silence until morning brought news from Frank Miller. The thieves had been caught, 2 killed in the shootout and 3 taken into custody. Among the captured was the Thompson Ranch's foreman, who had been feeding information to the gang about when and where to strike. The discovery shocked everyone in the community. They had been looking for outside threats while the danger came from within. Owen held Natalie close that night, both of them processing how easily everything could have gone wrong. "It is over now," she murmured against his shoulder. "We are safe." "We are safe," he echoed, and for the first time Natalie felt herself truly believing it. With the threat gone, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and the hard work of preparing for winter. Natalie threw herself into preserving food from the garden, learning to can vegetables and make preserves under Dorothy Miller's patient instruction. The older woman had become a friend, someone Natalie could talk to about the strange adjustment of married life and frontier living. "You love him," Dorothy observed one afternoon as they worked together in Natalie's kitchen. It was not a question. "I do." Natalie smiled, unable to hide it anymore. "I love him so much it terrifies me sometimes. I keep waiting for something to go wrong for this happiness to be taken away." "That is the risk of loving anyone," Dorothy said gently. "But it is worth it. Frank and I have been married 30 years, and I would not trade a single day of it, even the hard ones." Owen came in from the barn at that moment, tracking dust across the floor he had just swept. He froze when he saw both women looking at him, clearly aware he had committed some domestic crime. "I am sorry, I will clean it up." Natalie laughed, actually laughed, and watched his face light up at the sound. "Just take those boots off before you go any farther." Dorothy left shortly after, and Owen pulled Natalie into his arms, swaying with her in the middle of the kitchen for no reason other than wanting to hold her. "I heard you laughing. I love that sound. I love you." The words came easily now, no longer frightening. "I love our life here." "Good." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her mouth. "Because I plan on spending the next 50 years making you laugh as often as possible." Winter arrived with snow that turned the valley into a wonderland. The work was harder, requiring constant attention to the cattle and horses, making sure they had access to food and water despite the cold. But the nights were longer, giving Natalie and Owen more time together by the fire, talking and reading aloud to each other from the few books they owned. One particularly cold night in January, Natalie woke feeling ill. She barely made it outside before losing her dinner, and when she came back in, Owen was waiting with a blanket and worried eyes. "Should I ride for the doctor?" "No." She let him wrap the blanket around her, her mind racing with calculations and realizations. "I think I might be pregnant." Owen went very still, and then he was pulling her close, his whole body trembling. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but the signs are there." "Owen, I am scared." "I know." He stroked her hair, his voice steady even though she could feel his racing heartbeat. "But we will get through this together. I will take care of you, I promise." The winter seemed to last forever as they waited for Natalie's pregnancy to become certain. By February, there was no doubt, and Owen rode to town to arrange for the doctor to check on her monthly. Dr. Harrison was an older man with kind eyes who examined Natalie thoroughly and pronounced her healthy and strong. "You should do fine," he told them both. "You are young, well-fed, and from what I can see, the baby is developing normally. The birth should be in late summer, early September if my calculations are correct." Owen held her hand through the entire examination, and afterward he helped her back into the wagon with such exaggerated care that she had to laugh at him. "I am not made of glass. You are carrying our child. You might as well be made of the most precious glass in the world." As spring arrived and her belly began to swell with obvious pregnancy, Owen became almost comically overprotective. He tried to take over all her chores, worried about her lifting anything heavier than a teacup. Natalie had to establish firm boundaries about what she could and could not do, insisting that she needed to stay active and useful. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him after he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. But you are my woman, carrying my baby, and I will protect you both even if it makes you angry with me." She softened at the raw emotion in his voice. "I am not angry, but you need to trust me to know my own limits." They compromised, with Owen taking over the heavier work while Natalie continued with cooking, gardening, and lighter household tasks. He talked to the baby every night, his hand on her belly, telling their child about the ranch and the life waiting after birth. Natalie would watch him with tears in her eyes, overcome by how much this man loved them both already. Dorothy Miller helped Natalie prepare baby clothes and blankets, sharing stories about her own 4 children and grandchildren. "The pain is terrible," she admitted honestly, "but it ends. And then you have this perfect little person who is part of you and part of Owen, and nothing else matters." The baby arrived on a hot September night in 1879, exactly 1 year after Natalie had arrived in Laramie. The labor was long and painful, with Dr. Harrison coaching her through each contraction while Owen held her hand and whispered encouragement. She screamed and cursed and squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise, and he took it all without complaint, his face pale but determined. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, the doctor cleaned him quickly and placed him on Natalie's chest. "You have a son." Natalie looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant and felt a wave of love so intense it made the pain of the last hours fade to nothing. Owen stared at both of them with tears streaming down his face, reaching out a trembling finger to touch the baby's tiny fist. "We made him," Owen whispered in awe. "We made this perfect little person." They named him James after Owen's father, and the ranch seemed to come alive with new energy. Owen walked around with the baby constantly when he was not working, talking to him about cattle and horses and the land that would one day be his. Natalie watched them together and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. One evening, about a month after James was born, Natalie realized she had not reached for her knife before going to sleep in days. The habit that had sustained her for years had simply faded away, replaced by the security of Owen's arms and the life they had built together. She mentioned it to Owen, who smiled and pulled her closer. "You do not need it anymore. You have me, and I will always stand between you and anything that tries to hurt you. I know." She kissed him softly. "I finally believe it." The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, and there were setbacks with weather, prices, and the constant challenges of frontier life. But Natalie and Owen faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Sarah and another son named Daniel, and the house expanded to accommodate their growing brood. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Natalie back up to the ridge where he had first told her he was falling in love with her. The children were with Dorothy Miller for the night, giving them rare time alone. They sat watching the sunset, older now but still fitting together as perfectly as they had from the beginning. "You remember that first night?" Owen asked, "when you told me you slept with a knife?" "I remember you telling me I would not need it here." Natalie leaned against his shoulder. "You were right. I wanted to make you feel safe," he said quietly. "I wanted to give you a reason to put down your weapons and just live. You gave me more than that. You gave me a home, a family, a future I never thought I could have. You gave me yourself, and that was everything." Owen turned to kiss her, the same mix of passion and tenderness that had characterized their entire marriage. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Natalie Rutherford. I loved you before I met you, from the first letter you sent. I loved you when you arrived with fear in your eyes and steel in your spine. I love you more now than I thought possible, and I will love you until I take my last breath." "And I love you," she whispered back. "My cowboy who saw a scared woman with a knife and offered her safety instead of judgment. You saved me, Owen. We saved each other." They sat together as the sun set over their ranch, over the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. Below them, the cattle grazed peacefully. The house waited with warm lights and full cupboards, and their children slept safe and loved. Natalie thought about the woman she had been a decade ago, stepping off that stagecoach with a knife hidden against her ribs and terror in her heart. That woman could never have imagined this happiness, this sense of belonging and being cherished. But she had taken the leap anyway, had trusted despite all her reasons not to, and found in Owen Rutherford a partner worthy of that trust. They had built something beautiful together in this wild, harsh land, proving that love could flourish even in the most unlikely soil. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Owen helped Natalie to her feet, and they walked hand in hand back to their horses. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, and the chaos of 3 young children. But tonight, they had this moment of peace, this reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. The knife that had once been Natalie's most trusted companion now lived in a drawer in the kitchen, used only for chopping vegetables and cutting bread. She had not needed it for protection in years, and never would again. Owen had kept his promise, creating a space where she could finally lay down her weapons and simply be loved. Their ride back to the house was unhurried, both of them reluctant to end this perfect evening. But as the house came into view with its welcoming lights, Natalie felt only eagerness to return home. Because that was what this place had become, truly and completely. Not just a house or a piece of land, but home, filled with laughter and love and the sound of children playing. Over the following years, the ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Owen's cattle operation expanded until he was able to hire the help he had always dreamed of, young men from town who wanted to learn ranching. Natalie's garden became famous in the area, and she often shared her preserved goods with neighbors and at church socials. Their children grew strong and healthy, shaped by the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion that both parents instilled. James, as the oldest, showed his father's love for the land and his mother's practical determination. Sarah inherited Natalie's fierce independence and Owen's gentle heart. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, content to spend hours reading or helping his mother in the garden. The Rutherford Ranch became known as a place of hospitality and fairness. Owen and Natalie opened their doors to travelers needing a meal or a night's shelter, remembering how vulnerable they had both felt in their early days. They treated their hired help with respect and fair wages, creating loyalty that lasted for decades. When Natalie turned 40, Owen threw her a surprise party that brought together everyone from the surrounding ranches and the town of Laramie. Dorothy Miller, now in her 70s but still spry, pulled Natalie aside during the festivities. "I told you on your wedding day that Owen was a good man," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "Did I steer you wrong? Not even a little bit." Natalie watched her husband across the room, laughing with their sons while Sarah attempted to teach them all a new dance she had learned. "He is the best man I have ever known. And you are the best thing that ever happened to him. We all saw how lost he was before you came. You gave him purpose beyond just survival." Natalie hugged Dorothy tightly, grateful for the friendship and guidance the older woman had provided over the years. So many of the good things in her life could be traced back to taking a chance on a stranger's letters, on believing that somewhere in this vast territory, there might be a man who would value her for who she was, rather than what he could take from her. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Owen found Natalie on the porch, looking out over the moonlit valley. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder in a gesture that had become their signature embrace. "Happy birthday, my love. It was perfect. Thank you for doing this. You deserve celebrations every day for putting up with me for nearly 20 years." She turned in his arms to face him, cupping his face in her hands. He had gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the nervous young man who had met her at the stagecoach. "Putting up with you is the easiest thing I have ever done. Loving you is as natural as breathing." They stood together in the cool night air, holding each other close, and Natalie sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the life she had been given. The frightened mail-order bride who had arrived in Wyoming with a knife and a heart full of fear had become a woman who knew her worth, who had found love and built a family, who had transformed a house into a home filled with warmth and laughter. The years continued to pass in the way they do for those who are happy, each season bringing its own rhythms and joys. Grandchildren began to arrive as their children married and started families of their own, filling the house with noise and chaos that Natalie and Owen welcomed with open arms. The ranch was eventually divided among the 3 children, ensuring that the Rutherford name would continue on this land for generations. On their 30th anniversary, Owen and Natalie renewed their vows in front of their children and grandchildren, speaking words of love and commitment that carried the weight of 3 decades of partnership. When the informal ceremony ended, their oldest grandson asked Owen how he had known that Natalie was the right woman to marry sight unseen. Owen looked at his wife, his eyes soft with emotion. "I did not know for certain. But I read her letters and felt that she understood what it meant to fight for something better, to hope even when you had every reason not to. And when I saw her step off that stagecoach with her chin up and her shoulders back despite being terrified, I knew she had the strength this life would require. Everything after that was just falling more and more in love with her every single day." Natalie felt tears slip down her cheeks as she listened to her husband describe their beginning. "And I knew he was different when he offered me my own room and promised to wait until I was ready to be his wife in truth. He gave me the choice, the respect, and the safety to find my own way to loving him. Not every woman is that fortunate." Their granddaughter, a serious girl of 12, spoke up then. "Grandmother, is it true that you used to sleep with a knife?" The assembled family went quiet, and Natalie realized that her children had never told their own children that particular story. She glanced at Owen, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, I did. I had lived a hard life before coming here, and I had learned that I could only rely on myself for protection. That knife represented my determination to survive, to never be a victim again." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But your grandfather showed me through his actions, day after day, that I did not have to fight the world alone anymore. He gave me a partnership where I could be both strong and vulnerable, where I did not have to choose between safety and love." "You still have the knife?" another grandchild asked. Owen stood and went into the house, returning a moment later with the old blade. It was worn now, the handle smooth from years of use in the kitchen. He handed it to Natalie, who held it up for everyone to see. "This knife has cut more vegetables and sliced more bread than I can count. It serves a useful purpose every day. But I have not needed it for protection since the night your grandfather promised me I was safe here. That promise has held true for 30 years. She handed the knife back to Owen, who set it aside and took her hand instead. The gathering continued with food and stories late into the night, multiple generations of Rutherfords celebrating the love story that had started it all. When everyone finally departed or went to bed in various rooms throughout the expanded house, Natalie and Owen found themselves alone in their bedroom. "Can you believe we have all those grandchildren?" Owen marveled as he helped Natalie out of her good dress. "Sometimes I still feel like the nervous young man waiting for you to arrive. And I still sometimes feel like the scared woman stepping off the stagecoach." She turned to face him, now in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. "But then I look at what we built together, and I am amazed at how far we have come." They climbed into bed, and Owen pulled her close the way he had every night for 30 years. Natalie rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, the sound that had become her favorite in all the world. "I love you, Natalie, more than words can express. And I love you, Owen. Thank you for seeing past my fear to the woman underneath. Thank you for giving me a chance to be more than I thought I could be. You gave me the same gift," he whispered into her hair. "We saved each other, remember?" They drifted off to sleep together, safe and warm and loved. Two people who had taken a chance on each other and found everything they had been searching for. The ranch was quiet around them, settled into the peace of night, and somewhere in a kitchen drawer, an old knife rested unused because its owner had finally found the security she had spent her whole life seeking. Their story, which had begun with letters and hope and desperate courage, had become a legend in their family, passed down through generations as proof that love could be found in the most unexpected places. The mail-order bride who slept with a knife, and the cowboy who promised she would not need it there, had built a legacy of love, partnership, and unwavering devotion that would endure long after they were gone. And as they slept in each other's arms, surrounded by the fruits of their decades together, both Natalie and Owen knew that they had been blessed beyond measure. They had found each other in a wild, unforgiving land and created something beautiful that would outlast them both. Their love story was complete, a testament to the power of trust, courage, and the willingness to believe in the possibility of happiness, even when every past experience suggested otherwise. The knife was no longer needed. It never would be again.